on your right, Will Kalchik. Both these players very strong. Will just qualified for the Pro Tour the other day. Theo has been sort of a staple of the Pro Tour since, really hitting his stride in Magic here post-pandemic.
Yes, and I know Theo played Mono Red at the last Pro Tour, so he should be quite familiar with the various tricks that Will is up to. Though that said, it's another reason to have that juke with the cutter plan that's a little bit different. So Theo's going to have to adapt his tactics to the threat of Corey Steel Cutter and Demonic Ruckus, along with the card advantage of Ren's Resolve.
Yeah, and that's something I really want to talk about here. That I think a lot of players underappreciate that one of the big advantages of knowing all the decks and sort of learning how decks play, even if it's just big picture wise, is when you're in these open deckless situations and maybe you run into something a little bit more off the beaten path, right? The Demonic Ruckus build of Mono Red Cutter here, for example. You got to sort of think about the adaptations and sort of what does this mean being in the deck versus the cards it's replacing, right? We talked to Will. You talked about how you normally expect Lightning Strike, but there was a Braids. Even that small change has huge implications in a game.
Yeah, definitely. The biggest implication I see from Kowalczyk's list, though, with all the Ruckuses and Ren's Resolves and other spells in the deck, he doesn't have any room for any main deck 5 damage removal spells. No Witch Stalker Frenzies. Those are very important in this matchup. So game one for Will, I think he has to be aggressive. He doesn't have the appropriate interaction for the big creatures out of the Oculus deck. He needs to get on the board fast, end this game quickly, and try to steal a non-interactive game, then get to his sideboard where he's loaded with good interaction.
I like that. Will also on the play. Remember, Will was one of the few foreign ones who had to actually play this round. So now number 2, meaning there's only one person in top 8 who's going to be on the play versus Will today. Super important for any format, let alone this very aggressive one with a mono red deck.
And one of the weaknesses of Jeskai Oculus is its mana base. If Theo on the draw here and a mulligan to 6 stumbles, Will could win the game by turn 4.
Yeah, and we're seeing Theo really tank this. It's a 1-lander. It has a Spyglass Siren. It has a Helping Hand. It has, a Sheltered by Ghost, but it is a 1-lander.
Yeah, it's a 1-lander. It has Shelter, which is one of his best main deck cards in the matchup, but he doesn't have any sizable creature to put it on. He doesn't have a way to get an early Oculus, doesn't have Prosthetic Memory to start growing his creatures, doesn't have any ways to discard cards to grow the Marauding Mako. So his hand needs a little bit of help, but if it does come together, it could be very powerful.
Oh, and we drew Seachrome Coast for turn number 1. That's huge. That guarantees us that second land.
Yeah. And it leads with the Spyglass Siren baiting out a removal spell from Will. I think that's really smart. Will not playing a turn 1 drop likely has a removal spell. Theo wants the Mako to resolve. He'd rather have Mako map onto that because then if he draws something like a Steamcore Scholar or a Tursa, he can make a really big Mako and that'll be a great target for the Sheltered by Ghosts.
All right, Amberheart Challenger is the play. Mako comes down off the Shivan Reach. We are going to lose 1. We are going to pop the map just like you said. Let's see what's on top. It's Torch the Tower.
Not a bad card in the matchup, but not exactly what Theo is looking for here. He did not draw the 3rd land for turn. And so, yeah, that goes to the graveyard.
Yep. Needs to hit that land drop. Will might be able to infer something like that here. Maybe you might think there's another Torch in hand. It's obviously a card that's typically pretty nice here. Will's going to play a Rockface Village to start the turn.
And I think that was a Tursa drawn for Theo's turn. So if he can find a 3rd land, that is an ideal sequence of draws for his hand. 2 lands and a Tursa to turn on the Mako.
Demonic Ruckus here's the play for the Amberheart Challenger. Going to trigger Prowess as well. Triggered Valiant. We didn't hit anything we wanted to play. Hired Claws to follow up.
Okay, big turn. Theo needs a land. I don't think he found it. And now, yeah, he found a Profs. He's too far behind, has to run out the Shelter here and hope his Marauding Mako lives, and then he can start pumping it next turn either with Profs or Tursa if he finds a land.
Yeah, so not exactly a perfect curve out, but a pretty good place to be. That Shelter by Ghost does grant lifelink as well as removing that mouse. So we're going to be back up here. Going to pay the ward on the Shelter by Ghost. The Challenger is going to come back. Notably, the Mako is actually exiled as well. We'll get that fixed here in a second. That can matter with hard casting Oculuses. And we found the Adhikar Waste finally.
Just, I think, a turn too late here.
I think might be some discrepancy about life totals. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. If it was the graveyard thing with Torch the Tower, it'd be fixed pretty quickly. So it makes me think, oh, maybe it was that, and just the judge is just confirming some stuff.
Looks like they've set everything straight.
Yeah, it's all good. Maybe does Will have Torch the Tower in his main deck as a 2 of? Oh, I think actually this is the problem here. So we're noticing it right now. We're just catching it. Will is not supposed to have Torch the Tower in his main. He sideboards that card, and I believe that is sort of where the judge call is going. Let's cut back to us real quick as we figure this out really quickly here. This might be, a very simple situation where both players messed up. I mean, it's open deck list, right? And Theo looked over the deck. We saw that. Theo doesn't even catch it here for a second. I'm glad we did catch it here so we can figure all that out. I imagine a situation where, Will won, very excited, ran over to talk to us in the future match area and just didn't de-sideboard and was sideboard for the mono red deck, right? Or excuse me, the Is It deck, right? So we had a lot of cards very similar to that there.
Yeah, failed to de-sideboard, and we'll see how the judge rules this. Normally these things are caught earlier in the game.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, if it's caught earlier enough, especially like in your opening hand, they can just make the swap, and you can move forward. Here, a torch previously resolved in this game, and now we're casting a second one.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to just make the swap and say no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and it's awkward too, right? Because Torch is also a card that lots of mono red players are main decking, and Will, in an interview with us, actually talked about how we move some of those numbers around, right? Like last weekend, this actually was what our main deck looked like, and now it is not, and has been kind of a huge sort of part of this game in the development. We are going to figure that out here to the best of our ability. Maybe what we can do is it possible we can check in on our backup feature match and check out, how the mono black versus Demir game is going. We're going to let production look in there. But Ross, what I will say is this has been a pretty interesting game so far. A lot of back and forth, and really shows just, I think, the power of both of these decks that aren't quite into the deck that people are running for, but they're real decks.
Oh, very much so. And I think Theo keeping that risky hand on the draw came very close to paying off. And sometimes those are the risk that you have to take on 6 cards. It's very difficult to win on 5. And still would have been in strong position without the Sheltered by Ghost dying, or if the Sheltered by Ghost didn't die, I should say, because he would have been able to start pumping the Marauding Mako. But the game really, as it played out, came down to, do you have an answer to this Marauding Mako right now? Will did. And I think, unfortunately, he had it out of his sideboard.
Yeah, exactly. So just behind the scenes, we can actually always see our main feature match. We have a little itty bitty camera that we can see on our back end here. And it looks like our players are picking up their cards. So we're going to get confirmation on what the ruling is here. My guess is that we're issuing a game loss to Will for, a misregistered deck or whatever. It's the best we can do in this sort of situation. And we're going to move on to game number 2, as it looks like both players are sideboarding. And yeah, you see Theo was awarded the point here. And we're just going to have to go from here. This is, a thing that does happen. Both these players know each other. They play a lot of these same events. There's no ill intentions, whatever. These sort of things, unfortunately, do happen. I'm going to say for Will, though, looks like the Torch Towers are pretty good. Maybe keep those in as we take a look at the sideboard here with 4 Torch the Tower, 4 Sunspine Links, 2 Scorching Shot, 3 Lithuanian Barrage, and 2 Case the Crimson Pulse.
Yeah, the good news for Will is, even though he has to win 2 sideboard games here, he has a great sideboard to do it. The barrages, the Scorching Shots being removal spells for bigger creatures are excellent. Torch, at the very least, is an upgrade on Burst Lightning, being able to kill 3 toughness creatures like Fear of Missing Out, or just creatures that have been slightly pumped, is quite relevant. And then Sunspine Links is also a solid card in the matchup, can deal huge chunks of damage because the mana base is very non-basic heavy for the Jeskai deck, and is almost completely asymmetric with only 2 non-basics in Kowalczyk's list in the 2 copies of Rockface Village. Typically, these mono red decks pre-Cutter had more non-basics in them, maybe a 3rd Village, maybe a couple copies of Soulstone Sanctuary even, but hard to play those when you have Corey Still Cutter in the deck, because then you really need to double and triple spell, and then stumbling on mana when you want to play a bunch of 1 mana cards, and you have a Colorless Land or a Rockface Village that doesn't cast your non-creature spells, can be very punishing. So He has to sacrifice a little bit of utility as mana base, but he makes his Sunspine Lynxes that much better. So a really strong sideboard here from Will. And the only thing he has to be wary of is potentially over sideboarding.
Definitely. Well, let's take a check over on Theo Jung's sideboard and see what he's bringing. We have 2 Abrade, 2 Destroy Evil, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 1 Exercise, 2 Ghost Vacuum, 1 Lorn of the Third Path, 1 Negate, 2 more Sheltered by Ghosts, and 2 Winter Night Stories.
So the 2 Sheltered by Ghosts are the real coup here. They will certainly be coming in for Theo. Everything else gets a little bit trickier because this is not a typical mono red deck. So you have to prepare for both the Mice package and the Cutter package. One card that I think can play well there is Exercise, specifically because there's 4 copies of Sunspine Lynx in the opposing sideboard. So you have a card that can deal with Cutter or Lynx. You can bring in the Abrades, which are a decent removal spell, but also give you an answer to Cutter. And maybe you want access to a 4th removal spell for Cutter in Lauren of the Third Path that can also potentially trade in combat for an opposing creature or come back with a helping hand if you need to trigger it twice. So those would be the cards that I'd be considering. It'll just depend on exactly how many answers to Cutter Theo wants on top of the Sheltered by Ghosts.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And you know what else makes sense to me, Ross? Checking out our future events as these players are still sideboarding, because we have got some coming up for you. First, we have this team sealed event. You can scan the QR code on screen to get all the information. We have a Saturday portion of this as well. It's not just Final Fantasy Team Sealed, but we really want to show this off. We've heard from you all that you love Team Sealed. And Ross, you were talking to me between breaks about how much you love Team Sealed.
I do. I think it's one of my favorite things in Magic is the build portion of a team sealed tournament. It's a very unique puzzle, very different than regular sealed, because regular sealed, you're mainly just looking for your best cards and hoping that it lines up with the depth in your pool. Because it's in team sealed, you're able to take all the best parts of a huge pool and divide it up. You almost always get to play all of your best cards, and finding the right way to pair them becomes the more important part. You're not limited so much on power level. You're really just trying to use every single ounce of it. And so the decks are more powerful. I think the gameplay is more fun, and the build portion is a unique aspect of Magic that I think is really fun to experience, and one that players don't get a lot of opportunities to do so these days.
Definitely. Well, let's check out some of the other events here, as we have announced the second half of our year's events here. So July 19th to the 20th, we'll be in St. Paul, Minnesota. We have Modern 10K Showdown on Saturday, and then a 5K Legacy Trial on Sunday. Legacy players, we know you love playing Paper Legacy. Come on out and have some fun. We'd love to see you there. August 23rd to the 24th, we have Lansing, Michigan. Saturday, 10K Standard Showdown. Sunday, Team Trial, Standard Modern Pauper. Now, Ross, I know you really like Pauper. I want to hear a little bit about your thoughts with this.
I am so jealous of the Italians and all the Pauper events they get to play, and I see Andrea Mengucci tweeting every time he goes to a Pauper event with his sweet Pauper decks. The format is so fun. I love the idea of being able to play competitive Magic on a budget. I always feel sad when people ask me, like, what would you replace this card with if you can't afford it? And I just kind of look at them and be like, your deck's just going to be so much worse. And so having a format that is much more accessible to players, I think, is great. I would love to see more support for it over here on this side of the Atlantic. And I'm really excited to see it on the NRG series. I don't play very much Pauper, but I really want to. There's just so few opportunities, Mason.
That's fair. Well, hey, here's an opportunity if you're like Ross. Come on out. We had a Pauper side event during the Breach era. It went really well. We had a lot of people really like it. We'd love to see you there. Really quickly here, as our players are shuffling up and dealing up, 13th and the 14th in Mundelein of September. Modern on Saturday. Sunday, we're figuring out. Could be Pauper, could be Sealed, could be Legacy. Who knows? Could be Pioneer. That's what I'm pitching for. November 1st and 2nd, Elmhurst, Illinois. Team Showdown, Standard, Sealed, Modern. Once again, we're trying out some stuff there. Let's get to the feature matches. Those players are ready.
We'll start.
Fire Hero.
Drop.
Spirebluff can now pass. Looks like.
I think there's a torch in hand for Theo.
And yeah,
it does take a risk there. If Will had played something like second 1-drop attack, hold up Monstrous Rage, it becomes very awkward to try to use the torch. But was that not a torch?
Yeah, I think it might actually been a fear of missing out. I thought it was a torch too, but I think Theo just did a little flicking, and there's a fear of missing out. Discard an Oculus.
And we know Theo has the helping hand, so that Oculus will be entering the battlefield next turn. The question becomes, does Will have an answer to it? He has 2 Scorching Shots, 3 Lithomantic Barrage in his 75. Likely brought all 5 of them in here for the post-sideboard game, so good chance he's able to answer it, but Theo will at least get a Manifest Dread for his troubles, and the Oculus will always go back to the graveyard where he can reanimate it later.
Yep. We see just a land for turn here from Will, a trigger, and the Heartfire Hero, giving it almost assuredly double strike here. Could be trample technically, though, but I don't think that'd be the best play we've ever seen. And we're doing a little math.
Yeah, very strong start from Kowalczyk. Heartfire Hero Manifold Mouse is the ideal for these red decks, and even has the Monstrous Rage as well. So that's going to turn this into a 12 power attack. Theo soaks up 3 of it with the FOMO. It's going to take 9 and fall to 7.
Yeah, I like this there from Will too. You could have attacked with the Manifold Mouse, and that could have also gotten the Monstrous Rage, excuse me. But Will was trying to, I think, get the FOMO off the board. As Prophetic Memory is going to come down, here's an Inspiring Vantage. We do have Helping Hand, but look on Theo's face. He clearly doesn't love it. He has Torch the Tower. Could bargain to Torch the Tower, but it's not enough thanks to the Monstrous roll.
He would love to be able to just Helping Hand the Oculus and put a counter on it with Profs so that it is outside of Scorching Shot barrage range. But the 2/2 is just not good enough defense here. He has to deal with one of these threats if he wants to live through the turn.
Yep, and we're seeing that as he torches the tower down. Manifold Mouse. It's funny, Manifold Mouse is secretly almost always the right one to get. Obviously, it matters, but the double strike granting to all these mice makes it so that it's like, yeah, you're getting hit by the Heartfire Hero, but we know who is behind it all. As here's Sunspine Links coming down, dealing 3 and attacking for lethal. That was a quick one.
Yeah, very strong draw for Will Kowalczyk, and Theo really needed that Torch the Tower on turn 1. If he had had the torch that we saw on turn 3 on turn 1, is able to deal with either the Manifold Mouse or the Heartfire Hero early, then he has enough breathing room on his life total to be able to Helping Hand on turn 3, get back the Abhorrent Oculus, and go from there. But just too much pressure, too quick for the red deck, and Theo didn't interact at all on the first 2 turns of the game on the draw. That is just not something you can get away with against the strong mouse draws.
Yep. We're taking a look here at this sideboard really quick, just like Theo did. Theo pulled out his sideboard, rippled through it for a second, shook his head no, put it back in the deck box, shuffled up like it. Theo decides, you know what? It's going to be good enough for game 3. We had good enough here for game number 2. Will Kowalczyk doing the same thing quickly here. We'll show this deck list. But I also want to talk about one of our side events at all the NRG events this year. We talked a lot about Popper and Team Sealed, but we have Value Vintage going on. This is a really cool format that's been popping up recently. You can scan the QR code on screen to get more information about it if you want to get into details. But the too long didn't read is basically vintage legality. Your deck can't cost more than $30. Super fun. Lots of cool things going on. Let's cut back to our feature match areas. These players are dealing with their hands. Looks like a very fun format. I really want to try it out at one of the events coming up.
First card I saw on Theo's hand here was a Torch the Tower, which is a good sign, but I guess the rest of the hand was not very good since he sent that one back in a hurry.
Yeah, it looked like it was Torch, Shelter by Ghost. I think the only land was an island. kind of not what you want there. The one of fun of basic coming back to bite us. Looks like Will, though, very happy with this 7. Fans him out, sits down, and thinks about how I might be one step closer to winning this event and locking up a bunch of points that I need. Because Theo, he's our champ. He won last year. He's already invited back. He's playing for the love of the game. We're in his hometown right now.
Hashtag shrink the game.
That's right. Grayson Nimitz has been doing it a bunch, so Theo thought, I can't let Grayson have all the fun.
Can't let anybody else get too big for their britches here.
Ronnie Maka. Theo was, also the player that our player of the year last year decided to dodge. We have a perk. If you're the player of the year at our champs, you get to pick one person you don't play in the Swiss rounds. Theo was his pick. And lots of players agreed that was the right pick at the time, too. Heavily respected here. Torch the Tower, answers to Mako. Land past the turn. Corey Steelcutter comes down. Nothing here for Theo.
Theo's hand is some lands, a Steam Core Scholar, and a Sheltered by Ghosts. So gets to turn those lands into something. Found a Braid Helping Hand. Sends the 2 lands away. So he has an answer for the cutter next turn. and can limit the damage to 1 monk. But what he really wants is to find a big creature that he could put this Sheltered by Ghosts on.
All right. Lithomantic Barrage on the Steam Core to trigger Flurry. And getting in here, we have a Higher Claw as well heading to the battlefield. Only 2 lands for Will.
Yeah, and this Lithomantic Barrage is honestly pretty good for Theo. I think he's pretty happy to helping hand the Scholar and get deeper into his deck for only 1 mana. I think he might have found a second Sheltered by Ghosts, so I wonder if we'll see Theo try to play 1 here, hope it lives for a turn, and then get a second. Could also try to keep land 4, the Seacrum Coast, and just go for a double Shelter next turn, but that would require him to discard the Abrade.
Yeah, and it looks like Theo's maybe thinking about discarding one of the Sheltered and keeping a Marauding Mako. All right, decides to discard the Mako and the
Deal with the
Seacrum
Abrade
Coast.
this turn and try to find another land next turn for the double Shelter. Oh no, goes for the Shelter. So he's taking the risky line. Limits his risk a little bit by dealing with the token and not the cutter. So that won't come back if Scholar dies. He also knows that if Kowalczyk spends a turn killing the Scholar, then he's not going to double spell. So
yeah,
and then he can abrade the cutter. So I like hitting the token.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it isn't the ultimate safe line when it comes to the cutter, but it is the one that I think gets the best chance of winning this game in a timely manner, because his hand does kind of fall apart if the Steam Core Scholar dies. It might be a classic moment if I can't respect it living either way.
And he also knew that Will missed his 4th land drop or 3rd land drop the previous turn. So even if he has the 1 mana removal spell, he'll have to draw land in order to be able to cast it. So I like the Sheltered line. Really would have, Theo wanted a 4th land here, didn't find it, it looks like. So still going to leave the cutter around because he has the Abrade for it and just deal with the more pressing threat in Emberheart Challenger.
Yeah, remember, Lithomantic Barrage is uncounterable. So if that had come down here, we would have dodged all the Sheltered by Ghost stuff. But Corey Steel Cutter and another Higher Claw. But this is a very large Steam Score Scholar. 4/2 lifelinking Vigilance.
Yeah, large in power, but not in toughness. So it's not going to be getting into combat on Will's turn. Looks like Theo did find a Prosthetic Memory. That is excellent here because it can start pumping up the Scholar.
Like this, get a card, drew Glacial Dragon Hunt.
Yeah, and then now his 4th land enters tapped. These are some of the issues that the Jeskai deck has. Its mana base, is very awkward. Theo had his pain lands early, his fast lands late, so he took extra damage early, and now he has to deal with tapped lands. You need to draw your lands in the other order to be able to curve properly, and it's just an added bit of inconsistency that the Oculus deck has to deal with that other decks in Standard don't.
Yep. We see life totals basically swap here, up to 17 for Theo, down to 11 for Will. Next turn, we might see Glacial Dragon Hunt, answer something, and grow the Oculus. But Will could find Lithomantic Barrage here, and the house of cards would tumble for Theo.
Yeah, this game is very much going to come down to whether Will can find the Barrage in time. Though, if he keeps triggering Cutter, he might be able to go wide around this Scholar.
Yeah, I mean, the Heartfire Hero grows. Scholar is, 3 toughness now, and we played 2 creature spells, not any non-creature spells, so we couldn't attack with any of the monk tokens there.
And that's one of the weaknesses of Mono Red Cutter relative to Izzet. So many of your spells are creatures. Your monks aren't actually all that big.
All right, Theo, Glacial Dragon Hunts. Reminder, you don't even have to discard if you don't want to.
So this can deal with a creature if Theo wants it to. Oh, he's, discarding the Abrade.
Yeah, interesting. Really says, sort of where Theo feels the game is going. Kind of maybe wants to keep the land so we can do something like try to flash back this Glacial Dragon Hunt on the future turn. Typically, I think this deck does, the 5th land is kind of like, that's sort of where you tap out, most of the time.
Yeah.
So keeping it here, very loud.
But if Theo doesn't have anything else going on, his only other play would be casting that Abrade, which would cost him a point of damage. It would kill the same thing, presumably. If Theo wanted to kill a Cutter instead of the Manifold Mouse, he would have done that. He decided that Manifold Mouse was more threatening. And in that case, he'd rather just discard, save himself the point of life, and have 2 mana up that Will has to think about. Maybe Will plays around a card that could be in Theo's hand here, and that gets him some equity in this game as well.
Will has only 3 lands, so cards like Sunspine Links, which could have been sort of nice at different points. And then you see Will sort of check on the ward. Theo remembers at least one of them. That's all we need, as Theo Jung's going to move on to our top 4. Congratulations there to Theo. Putting up a good run here with Jeskai Oculus. And congratulations to Will, putting up a great run as well in top 8 here, playing the Mono Red Cutter deck. Talked about top 8ing the 10K over at the RC just the weekend prior with this deck. Definitely has legs.
Definitely. He's been on a good streak. I think with that match, you can obviously point to the failure to D-sideboard in game 1. Things could have played out differently. But in game 3, if I'm Will, I'm looking back at that decision to be really aggressive with the Lithomantic Barrage on the Steam Core Scholar. That not only meant that the Sheltered by Ghost went unanswered, it also kind of unlocked Theo's hand because he had the helping hand. I don't know if Will had any other way to trigger Cutter that turn, and that was his motivation for being aggressive with the Barrage. But that's definitely a decision that in hindsight, he probably wants to take back.
Definitely. And speaking of take back, let's cut down to our feature match area, because Jess here on your left, Samir midrange, played against Carter on your right with Mono Black midrange. Carter lost in the Swiss. That meant Jess got to double draw in. That's why they're in 3rd place. Carter wants that revenge here. As we see a Gix's command, it's definitely getting cast. We're just a little unsure on exactly what mode we want to do, as I'm going to try and catch you up to speed here. We have a Soulstone Sanctuary, which seemingly has a bunch of counters on it. I don't know what those could be, but they're on them. We have a Shieldred, and then a Deep Cavern Bat with the opposing Shieldred underneath it, and an Enduring Curiosity that seems to be in creature mode, as I noticed Jess likes to de-sleeve the Curiosity when it's not a creature.
I would wager that the 3 counters are from Carsey Revenant.
Flying Death Touch Lifelink. That makes sense, Ross. That's why we pay you the average bucks. All right. It looks like we're going to go for the big mode and then sack a creature. And I guess the Curiosity is going to do that as a huge attack comes in here.
This is for 14.
I think it's 8.
The Archfiend's not getting in.
Yeah, the Archfiend's on defense. But it could have been for 14. We could have attacked. We decided not to. Shieldred's going to gain us 2 life up to 14.
Interesting decision to not attack with the Archfiend, because Jess doesn't have to attack the Shieldred into it. I guess at 14, this is now lethal, so maybe they do.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might have been a situation where, the ramifications of every play has led us to this point.
But also, Carter was not under threat of lethal on the way back here. Him being at 15, this attack is only for 8, and then you'll take 2 on when you draw off the Shieldred.
It could be Carter trying to force Jess to attack so that Carter can answer this Soulstone Sanctuary, or the Shieldred. Both are pretty good. And then if you trade off the draw, so you don't have to worry about it potentially killing you, as you are pretty close to that actually happening here. And if Jess has something like a bunch of Flood Pit Drowners, it could be disastrous.
Yeah, I think it's the Soulstone that's really gumming up the works. The fact that that is a card that can trade with these demons in combat and gain Jess a little bit of life. So that's been driving all of Carter's plays. Didn't get a great look at Carter's hand here. I did see a cut down, so that can answer the Deep Cavern Bat and unlock Carter's Shieldred.
Yeah. This is the spot where you do the Deep Cavern Bat build of this deck. There are moments where Deep Cavern Bat is great for sure, but the Cruel Claws Heist, being able to sort of steal something and kind of take it in these kind of greedy mid-range matchups, that's where the Bat, you're a little sad to have it.
Definitely.
And it looks like...
Yeah, it looks like Archfiend traded for the Soulstone here, so 4 going to come across to Carter, 3 life for Jess.
Now, Jess talked about how they almost played Oculus, but decided to switch back to Dimir because they've played it a bunch historically, had done well recently, and made sort of, a spur-of-the-moment thing as Oculus's matchup versus prowess has dipped. And it's been working out for them, as, they are undefeated on the weekend.
Yeah, undefeated, up a game here, and not looking like in that bad a shape here in game 2.
All right, dueling Shieldreds are about to happen as this demon slams in for 8. Looks like Jess has a fairy mastermind. We could get a little chump blocking going if we wanted to.
I think we'll chump block a little bit later. Want to play around the potential for Carter unlocking the Unholy Annex.
Agreed. I also think that the fairy mastermind, if your opponent plays Shieldred, flash it in, get your extra cards, gain some life back. It's going to basically do the same as chumping it.
Yeah. Jess has enough mana to play and activate in response to Shieldred, so they would draw 2, Carter would draw 1, and you would gain 4, deal 2 to Carter. That'd be pretty nice.
Definitely. It's hard to believe how Fairy Mastermind has sort of dropped in play. It was such a strong and powerful part of Standard. I mean, it's a great card, don't get me wrong. But the context of the format has just changed so much. Yeah. As Dreams of Steel and Oil is the play.
Fewer Unholy Annexes and Beanstalks and a lot more Shocks.
Yeah. A recipe for disaster. As it looks like nothing in hand, you do get to snag something from the graveyard. I can see at least a Deep Cavern Bat.
So that's a bad sign for Jess. I knew they had 3 cards in hand, but 2 of them, the other 2 being lands on top of this Mastermind, puts them in rough shape because Carter's hand is pretty well stacked.
Yep. This Fairy Mastermind is going to need to do a lot of work here. Now, the activate to draw extra cards could be great. And Enduring Curiosity, even, it's going to maybe get you cards. But Deep Cavern Bat actually, does block the Fairy Mastermind here.
Carter had the option to play Shieldred or go for the double discard. And given Jess's hand, I'm sure he would have much rather go back and go for the Shieldred.
Yep. As we do see Jess end a turn, activate Fairy Mastermind. That's going to cost Carter 2 life and gain them 4 life. Thanks to old Shieldred. And then another 2 here. So it's only like we've lost 2 since the last turn cycle. Another card, by the way, I think those are all lands. That hand is 5 lands there for Jess.
That's what we in the business call an oof.
Indeed. We collect them. As Carter's going to go up to 10 with the lifelink here. Now, we do have a creature land in the Restless Reef. So that's, if we're going to have a land, that's a good one to be.
Now another Shieldred trigger.
Yeah, Carter is falling down to 8. Another Deep Cavern Bat. Suck it, Deep Cavern Bat. You're useless.
Oops, all lands.
Yeah, Carter's going to write down all these lands. Remember, for the next, X number of turns, as here comes Shieldred. Land has been played for turn for Carter, so Fairy Mastermind's going to get activated in response with no worries.
So now Carter will take 2. Jess will gain 4.
And Jess picked up a Flood Pit Drowner.
Carter gets in with the Demon. If Jess has another removal spell, Drowner plus removal spell will set up a lethal attack, but I don't think they do. Or actually, no, just the Drowner with the Reef.
Yeah, the Drowner on the Reef is lethal. So I think, you just let the attack happen here. Maybe you need to tap down the bat. I don't think the 1 life matters, though. But yeah, I think you're right. This should be lethal here. Shieldreds cancel each other out. Gix's command. Well, we had something going here. So it looks like Jess has been, you talked about this before. You've been struggling in this matchup a little bit as Demir. We need to go back and watch more of these feature matches from Jess here. She's cleaning it up.
I guess. I mean, Fairy Mastermind is excellent. And it is a card that has started peaking back up. You occasionally saw like 1 in sideboards. I'm starting to see 2. And because this Demon deck is here, Domain is around. And it's just a really good mana sink in these long games. And it looks like it just carried Jess through this that flood. Hard to win games in these mid-range mirrors when you draw 4 or 5 lands in a row in the mid-game, but Fairy Mastermind undid all of that.
Yeah, really impressive card. And great play there from Jess as well. They really sort of shown us time and time again in this matchup, right, and others as well, that this deck has a lot of play to it and does have a lot of power. So we have 1 match left, and it's going to game 3. So I think we're going to try and see if the players were literally picking up their cards, we can move them to a feature match area. If they've already started playing, we can't move them. Sort of just how the way the world works. I am thinking that we're going to get them over here. Looks like we actually cannot. That's our mistake. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back as soon as the last match of top 8 finishes with the first match of top 4. So we'll be back soon. See you then.